at war with himself, feared by all, tortured and alone. He is Vampire Hunter D. The second Vampire Hunter D film, Bloodlust, is a movie like no other, unless you include the original Vampire Hunter D. This is like that, but better. Better animation, better voice acting, better cinematography, better because of one man. Yoshiaki Kawajiri, the director who created last week's topic, the oh-so-wicked Wicked City, as well as the cult classic Ninja Scroll. Bloodlust is what we've come to expect from this guy. A haunting soundtrack and brilliant animation drive this gothic dream. The original from 1985 left me wanting more. There was this massive, complex world where vampires ruled the night and day, and it was like 10,000 years in the future, but also there was a gothic vibe, and somehow there were vampires, and it wasn't cringe. It was deep, even. Existential loneliness. Forever. That's what D deals with because he's immortal and a human-vampire hybrid, which means he doesn't fit into either side of society. The internal war and torture that rages in D's head is embodied by his Dhampir nature. By the way, in Bloodlust, they call him a Dunpeel, which is probably just a mistranslation. I'm gonna call him a Dhampir because I think it's a cooler word. D is tortured. His true feelings and intentions are a mystery. He's the epitome of the stoic masculine hero, yet he also looks kind of feminine, especially in the books. He hardly speaks, but when he does, he's very articulate and forward with his feelings. What we really needed was a day in the life of this guy with enough character interaction to reveal what's going on beneath the chic flowing clothes and big hat. Cue Bloodlust. This is the story that brings forth the hot, dripping enigma inside of D. This is the story of Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. The story you never knew. First, I've got a super exciting announcement. You might know, my name is Grant. I've just launched a new channel where I tackle weird questions that everyone has thought about, but nobody can agree on. My first project over there is, could ghosts be real? Even if you've already made up your mind on the topic of ghosts, give it a watch. Reality might be stranger than you think. Now, let's get back to it. A town is littered with crosses as a clear and widespread attempt to keep evil away. But when Myer Link shows up, symbols of God bend like wet noodles. Myer showboats by dropping down from the ceiling and scooping his maiden up. She's totally into it. In fact, it's later revealed that Charlotte, Link's love interest, went with him by her own free will. She was not kidnapped, as everyone reveals themselves to think. Charlotte's older brother and dad even hire D to get her back. Then D says that $10 million isn't enough to track down a guy like Myer Link. He's so evil that only $20 million will do for a mission that crosses paths with him. How could Charlotte possibly have jumped into the arms of a guy like him? The answer is that she is willing to embrace the darkness. Poetic, I know, but I mean it. More on that later. Everyone sees Myer Link as the spitting image of evil. It's hard to blame them considering he murders plants just by being near them. He even killed this guy's friends and cyborg horses. Not cool at all. A group of bounty hunters is competing with D, the Marcus brothers. They have adorned their tank with crosses, and there's a lot of heavenly light symbolism while they fight hordes of mutants that, like vampires, represent the evil they seek to purge from this world. After wrecking the hordes, their leader Borgoff fires an arrow simply by listening to D's clippity-clomping. But then... Anyway, like most attractive women in this universe, Layla, a bounty hunter and one of the Marcus brothers, follows D into the moonlight after he showboated like Mother Trucker. Before she catches up to him, we finally get a bit of insight into D's life during his conversation with Left Hand. Left Hand has a much bigger role in Bloodlust than its predecessor, whereas in the 1985 movie, he did contrast D's stoic, brooding personality. It's now that we really start to see who D is and is not based on his usually one-sided conversations with a demonic tumor on his hand. Left Hand starts with a bit of sarcasm.
So, you're outnumbered 4 to one. So what? They do have a head start, but when the sun comes up, the heat will slow them down.
He goes on to warn D that the sun is going to be a problem for him, being half vampire and all. D says it'll be fine. Throughout the entirety of the movie, this gross, weird tumor on this gorgeous man's palm says aloud everything the audience needs to know while still letting D remain mysterious and not blurt out useful information for storytelling purposes like a shonen protag does.
Your body's been using your spirit energy to keep you alive, and now you have nothing left!
It's brilliant, and Bloodlust uses this dynamic to its full potential. Left Hand is also useful, tracking footsteps for D, giving his 2 cents, even helping with reconnaissance when D arrives at Myer Link's transparent safe house. I also have a hunch that this hand parasite helps with more than just the basics. After Layla catches up to D outside of Link's safe house, she's mortally wounded by a laser eyeball. When D's about to leave her, his hand says,
"It's a shame, really, to waste all that good blood."
And you can tell by the tone of voice that Left Hand feels D's desires for crimson blood as deeply as D does. However, instead of lapping the blood up like a dog, D bandages Layla. Is this D's way of not wasting all that blood? Considering D and Left Hand's beings are intertwined, this all makes complete sense. Hand appears to be an outlet for D's urges. Left Hand never hesitates to voice his eagerness for blood and selfish behavior. The same behavior D has kept himself from in his 8,000 plus years of living. Could the parasite be partially responsible for D fighting his violent urges rather than giving in to them? You might say Left Hand holds some of the burden so D doesn't have to feel 100% of every twinge that makes him want to bite necks. Being a vampire with morals seems pretty hard. I'm glad D has some help. Not to mention, Left Hand keeps this lonely dude company. But back to that idea of being a vampire with morals is hard. Count Lee from the previous movie was so bored by eternity that he'd do anything for pleasure, and Myer Link is so lost in his urges that he's become synonymous with evil itself. This difficulty of being a vampire is highlighted most beautifully when Myer says to his lover Charlotte,
"Can anyone understand this pain, this loneliness?"
He gets to live forever so long as he isn't murdered, and yet he's lonely, and his bloodlust is a constant assault on his mind. Knowing this, is he evil? Or just misunderstood? Almost any human we see throughout this movie will tell you he and all vampires and dampiers are evil. The town sheriff even tries to arrest D simply for existing. He feels so threatened by this handsome creature of darkness that he can't wrap his head around a dampier who fights an internal conflict. This conflict is the essence of D's character. It's the one he fights constantly to keep himself from becoming the vampire that humans rightfully fear. There's a scene when D has been weakened by sun exposure, and Layla returns the favor he did for her by partially burying him to protect him from the sun's rays. She then admits her mother was killed by a vampire to this man she should despise. That's why she lives the lonely life of a hunter rather than settle down to actually live. She proposes that whichever of them die first, the other will bring flowers to their grave. She's afraid nobody will mourn her death. This is a beautiful moment of understanding between two people from different backgrounds who chose the same path. It's rare for someone to truly understand what you're going through, yet in this moment, D understood Layla's existential fears. He has lived with them for eons. You may recall from my last story you never knew on D that I wasn't sure how I felt about D's life. Was it even worth living? When he finds love, he discards it. When he finds friends, he does the same. What kind of life is that? I asked all of you. Turns out most of you thought it was a life worth living. How wholesome. However, I was skeptical until I got to the end of Bloodlust. By this time, all our side characters have died, leaving Layla with no other companion but D and Myer to fend for himself. While none of them were particularly important, the side character sacrifices gave us a ton of excellent action along the way and some classic gore. Then, we're introduced to the dreaded Carmilla. On the way to her castle, where Myer has taken Charlotte, Left Hand makes it clear that Carmilla is the worst. Left Hand also babbles on about how obviously Dee hates the idea of Charlotte and Myer marrying because another Dhampir being born means that they will also be shunned for eternity. But what he says about Carmilla is a different story. Her manic lust for blood, death, and power was so out of control that her father ended up killing her. It was that bad. Unfortunately, she still lives on as a ghost, waiting to reincarnate. She haunts the castle and uses her mystical powers to cast illusions in the minds of Dee and Layla. Layla is haunted by an image of her younger self crying over the grave of her mother. She tries to comfort her younger self by saying it's not her fault her mom died. Her inner child would disagree. However, while experiencing a similar hallucination, Dee fares a lot better. He sees his mother in a sea of blood. She confesses that she was incredibly lonely until Dee was born, who now, of course, lives his own life of loneliness. Rather than almost be crushed by a chandelier like Layla, Dee swiftly swings his sword at his fake mother and breaks the illusion. It was that easy for him. Clearly, he's gotten good at dealing with intrusive thoughts and feelings. In this moment, it becomes clear that beneath Dee's calm, quiet exterior is a sea of feelings and experience that has been molded in the millennia he's been alive. Dee has learned to overcome his darker fears, so he's hardly fazed by his mother in a sea of blood. This is the source of Dee's strength, inability to engage with the worst aspects of his psyche and cut them down when they try to sabotage him. That's a skill many of us are working on, and Dee has mastered it. You could say he has embraced the darkness and overcome it. It's the only way to maintain sanity when time is irrelevant. Charlotte, too, having accepted Myer as a lover, embraces the darkness of her own free will, and perhaps now it's easier to see why she would do that. There is power in understanding. The conflict between humans and vampires that's been raging for centuries, the love affair between human Charlotte and vampire Myer, flies in the face of that. By engaging with the darkness, Charlotte attempts to bridge the human and vampire world just as Dee does. In doing so, she could help humanity entwine with the night and harness it rather than hold crosses up to it and cower. There would finally be peace. Alas, she is killed by Carmilla, who needed virgin blood to bring herself back to life. Carmilla ruined the love affair, and it's clear now more than ever that Myer is just misunderstood. He says to Dee that they both deal with the same urges. Myer simply acts on them. He says the day will come when Dee acts on his. Dee is unfazed. After a final epic battle, Myer goes to space on a rocket with Charlotte's corpse in one last passionate gesture of love towards her. She may not be alive anymore, but he can fulfill his promise to bring her to the stars. Layla is so moved that she cheers for Myer's safe travels when just moments ago she was tormented by painful memories caused by a vampire's lust. Forgiveness. In the final scene, decades have passed, and Dee stands on the outskirts of Layla's funeral, who has died of old age. He is keeping his promise of mourning her death. He's pleased to see she was wrong that nobody would come to her funeral. Layla's change of heart towards vampires let her live a life of love and connection. She learned to accept their darker nature, and then she was able to truly live. To forgive those who you once thought were evil is a powerful thing. Layla's granddaughter asks if Dee would join her family for a while, but socializing isn't Dee's thing, so he gallops off on his cyborg horse. His loneliness continues. Or is it solitude? By keeping his promise to mourn Layla, Dee has shown he felt a genuine connection with this woman. The impact lasted decades, across generations. While Dee spends an eternity in solitude, to say he is lonely is clearly a misunderstanding. Left Hand gives him respite, and the people he meets along the way give him strength to move ever forward. The impact of his actions slowly seep into the world, into the hearts and minds of those he affects with his righteous quest. Perhaps one day, the effect of Dee will simply be a part of the human DNA, the social structure, the culture that permeates free will. He's not afraid, nor does he hesitate thanks to his drive and millennia of combating the darkness that is an intrinsic part of him, part of us all. D's experience with evil has sculpted his psyche into something we all strive to be. Embrace the darkness, learn to love it, but don't give into it. That's the story of D, of Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. The story you never knew. Bloodlust is one of my all-time favorites, and I hope I shed some light on it for you. Our lucky patron of the week is Noah Senpai. Noah, thank you so much for your help. With that, I'm Grant, and if you're looking for some weird, then check out Could Ghosts Be Real? Links in the description, or wait till the last 20 seconds. It's a super-duper passion project of mine. I worked really hard on it, and it would mean the world to me if you gave it a click. In the following excerpt, I ask the question, how does reality really work? How does reality really work? Reality